Hello internet friends, in this video I'm going to talk through the reverse engineering system for the ground game in Star Wars Galaxies. Space has its own system and it's very different, deserving of its own videos, so we're going to stick to reverse engineering for domestics, munitions and engineering traders. Reverse engineering is the process of taking junk loot and random statted clothing and armor that is dropped by mobs and turning it into skill attachments. There are 5 categories of skill attachments and these are divided up among the 3 professions. Munitions traders can create breastplate and armor attachments, domestics create shirt and clothing attachments, and engineers create weapon attachments. Before we get into the mechanics of the system, there are a few things you need to know and some items you'll need to get. First, there are 2 stats that affect how good you are at reverse engineering. These are reverse engineering chance and luck. To get these stats up to a level where you can be effective, you're going to need a reverse engineering suit. For the NGE version of Star Wars Galaxies, this consists of a breastplate, weapon and shirt. Each of these items should be slotted with reverse engineering and luck skill mods. For the breastplate and weapon, you're looking for +4 reverse engineering and +35 luck, and for the shirt the max is +3 reverse engineering and +35 luck. The reason the shirt is less is that munitions and engineering traders can bake an additional +1 into their items upon creation. Domestics traders who create the shirt, they can't do that. You'll also want to have +35 luck on every additional piece of clothing armor you're wearing. The idea is whenever you're reverse engineering, you don this suit basically. You gain reverse engineering skill automatically as you go up in levels, and there are also expertise boxes you'll want to get. I'll show you it here, but the suit is essential for high level reverse engineering. You'll also want the cybernetic deconstruction arm, which adds an additional +5 reverse engineering. Check out my video linked here in the top right to check out how to get that. Finally, there's this important skill in your given crafting profession. It'll be in a different place depending upon your profession, but this allows the creation of skill enhancing attachments with multiple modifiers. You need that to be able to craft the top tier enhancements. Once you've got all this, you'll want power-ups for the shirt, weapon and breastplate that boost reverse engineering chance. The aim here is, with all these items and skill boosts, to get to as close to the max as possible for reverse engineering before you begin. The max for reverse engineering is 159. For your luck stat, you'll want to get above 1000, as far above as possible, which should be doable with an entertainer buff, your statted gear, your class stats, and also any items such as styptic powder or the shard of retaliation. I should also mention food. You can see there Denelian fizz pudding in my inventory. That gives a good boost to luck. You need all this gear because you want to make sure that each time you reverse engineer, the item you're working on goes up in power. If your luck or reverse engineering skills are too low, you won't make any progress with the power bits you're going to be working on, and they can even lose power, so you'll be making them worse. You can mitigate this somewhat with an item called a reverse engineering enhancement module. This will stop the power bits losing power, but I'm not going to talk too much about that because honestly I've never used them. In my experience, it's a much better use of your time and resources to work on improving your base stats, getting the suit together and everything. Once those stats are high enough, you will never lose power when you reverse engineer. Worst case scenario, you will simply stay at the same level. That being said, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. To reverse engineer anything, you need a reverse engineering tool. These are crafted and you'll want one that is +10. This is the item into which you drop the junk loot and static clothing you'll be gathering. 2 items of junk loot, when combined together in the RE tool, click reverse engineer, will spit out something called a modifier bit. The types of junk will determine what you get, and there are literally thousands of combinations, so discovering them all yourself is virtually impossible. Instead, you'll want to visit the Junkyard website, link in the description below, where you can research what junk loot produces what stat. Junk loot combinations are set in stone and you have no stats associated with them, so when creating modifier bits you don't have to worry about power and whatnot. You do have to worry about this power conversion ratio, but that comes in later. The power of the item you're going to create is determined by power bits. These are created in much the same way, but this time instead of junk, you're dropping a piece of statted clothing or armor into the reverse engineering tool. The power bit the tool spits out will either be first or second order power bit. More on this later. and it will have a power level which is affected by your stats, so make sure you're wearing all your gear and are buffed when you do this. Additionally, the level of the item used and the potency of the stats already on the looted item will affect this, so try and get as high level item as possible with as high stats as possible. So there you are, you've got the two items you need to create a skill attachment. Combine these together in the tool and click Create Skill Attachment. You can also create a power up at this stage if you wish. Boom, you're done. Well, no, not by a long shot. You'll see that the attachment is far from great. To make it great, we have to repeat the process over and over and over again. To do that, we need a crafted piece of clothing with a socket available. This can be done either with clothing or armor items. We attach the attachment to the item of clothing, drop the clothing into the reverse engineering tool, click reverse engineer again, and the tool will hopefully return a power bit, again randomly either first or second order, that goes up a little bit in power, a little bit in level. This is the stage in the process where your stats really matter and the item can lose levels if you're not high enough with your stats yet. Now we repeat the process, adding a modifier bit once more and the power bit we're working on. Create skill attachment, add it to another piece of clothing and reverse engineer again. Hopefully you'll get a power bit that has gone up a level again. Rinse and repeat until you get your power bit up to level 35, that's the max. Now with that max level power bit, you can create a power up if you like, and it will be a good one, so you can sell that on the bazaar. Add the type of modifier bit you want with the power bit and click create power up. But we're still far from done. To create a skill attachment of the highest level with the most stats possible, we need 3 of these level 35 power bits. So I'll go ahead and create those now. You'll now have 3 power bits, at least one of which needs to be a second order power bit. So if you don't get one of those when you're doing this, keep creating power bits until you get a second order one. Now we're going to create the first stat on our skill attachment, add a first order power bit to the tool along with the modifier bit that you want. Click create skill attachment. Checking the attachment, you can see whatever stat you specified will be there. To add the second stat, drop the attachment along with a second order power bit and the modifier you want into the tool again. Click create skill attachment and you can see it now has the 2 stats applied. To create the third stat, the process is slightly different. First, we need to create a third order power bit. This is done by creating what I'm going to call a throwaway clothing item. Create a skill attachment with either one of those first or second order power bits that you've been using and a modifier bit. Slot that attachment into one of your socketed clothing items that you've been using throughout the process, then drop that item back into the reverse engineering tool along with a piece of looted gear that has 3 or more stats, must have 3 or more stats. Then reverse engineer those 2 things together and you'll get a third order power bit at level 35. Add this along with the skill attachment and your modifier bit of choice, then click create skill attachment one final time. And there you have it, a max level skill attachment with 3 stats. And if you can get to this stage, you'll be creating items that have in high demand on the bazaar. So we've got the basics down now, but within this there are things you need to get familiar with and processes for improving your workflow. As you've probably already gathered, creating multiple power bits and getting them all up to level 35 requires a lot of disposable statted clothing and crucially junk loot. There's simply no way around this, it's grindy. To give you an idea, if I set myself the task of creating 10 max level clothing attachments with my domestics trader, that means I need something in the range of 800 to 900 pieces of junk loot, 30 or so statted items of clothing, as high level and stats on these as possible so that the first initial reverse engineer gets as high a power bit as possible, about 10 statted clothing items with 3 stats or more for the third order power bits, and several hundred socketed clothing items. So you're going to need money to buy these things, time to grind for them, or create them yourself. I have a factory running constantly, for instance, that pumps out socketed shirts for me to use in this process. How you go about this is up to you, and everyone's way of working will be different, but I mention it here to give you an idea of the scale of things once you really decide to go hard with reverse engineering. Another thing to mention is that things can get complicated. For instance, if you have multiple characters of different professions working on different types of skill attachments, the best and most cost-effective way to do this would be to designate one of your characters to be the creator of the power bits and bring the others in only at the final stage to turn the power bits into the the final type of attachment that you want. Otherwise you would need several characters, all with crafting suits and duplicate power-ups and whatnot, so that's the best way to do that. Also bear in mind that when you are creating the power bits, you should always be working with the base stats: precision, strength, luck, agility, con and stamina, as you work towards the max of 35. If you drop an exotic stat like heavy weapon damage into the reverse engineering tool halfway through the process, you will lose much of your progress, since modifier bits have that power conversion ratio I mentioned earlier, and the value of the resulting power bit is divided by that number. The base stats all have a conversion ratio of 1, precision, strength, their conversion ratios of 1. So say you have a power bit of level 25 and add a precision modifier bit, the conversion ratio of 1, 25 divided by 1 is 25. You will lose nothing, and there's then a chance that the power will go up. If you add an artisan experimentation modifier bit, which has a power conversion ratio of 4, for instance, you would end up with a skill attachment that has decreased in strength to 6. I know that sounds complicated, but you know, you need to be just bear in mind you need to work with the base stats. That's all you need to know, really. So you work up the level of your power bits with the base stats, only create the final exotic attachment once you have your level 35 power bit. Also remember that exotic stats, exotic means anything other than the basic character stats, can only be added to breastplates, shirts and weapons. Pretty important for when you're planning out what you're going to create. You can't create a heavy weapon skill attachment that goes on a bandolier or a bracer, for instance. It doesn't work. It will only go on breastplate, shirts or weapons. This is an extremely complicated topic, and I've tried to distill it down as best I can in this video, but I'm sure people will have additional questions, so do ask them in the comments. Thanks for watching as always. Hopefully you enjoyed the guide, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.